I'm going to go through and talk about innovation today and give you a sense of how we approach innovation, the process that we're using for innovation. I'm going to run through a number of examples and to really give you a sense of what it means to be innovative in healthcare and in most part outside of traditional IT. So this really is what it comes down to for us. There's always a better way to do what we're doing in healthcare, and as you know, the need to drive efficiencies and to do things differently than we have in the past has really come to the fore with the recent legislation. And this is really the basis for the programs that we've launched in innovation. I'm going to start with this because I get asked this very frequently. I think you can count at best on one hand the number of healthcare organizations that have a chief innovation officer. They have a CIO, information officer, but very few have this role. And I think it's an emerging role that many healthcare organizations are going to consider here going forward. So I'm going to give you some thoughts on what this role is all about. And then drive into a process model for innovation and some examples here. So I am the entrepreneur in residence. I'm basically the internal venture investor for new ideas. What does that mean? So I've got a pot of money, a budget, discretionary budget, a process for driving innovation where I can seed emerging ideas that come from inside the organization as well as externally. I'm the equal opportunity disruptor. So you'll see, I'm going to put up an org chart, you'll see where I'm positioned. I have the ability to disrupt really the entire enterprise with new ideas. And I'm a relationship builder both externally and internally. Actually, I spend most of my time outside the organization, meeting with private equity firms, venture capital firms, startup companies that are thinking about new ideas, and I look to bring those in and collaborate with those. So I guess the difference between me and a traditional CIO is a CIO deals with vendors and I deal with partners. So if you're a vendor in the room here, don't bother calling me because I'm not buying anything, okay? I'm looking to collaborate, I'm looking to do joint R&D, looking to really take things to the next level. Now, when I do deal with more established companies, like we've dealt with Cisco and companies like that in the past, we deal mainly with their R&D side and look at what's coming out of the labs. So this is a org chart. So there I am, and you can see here, direct report into the CEO, and then down here you have the traditional roles in a hospital organization, chief information officer, marketing, CEOs of hospitals and facilities, SNFs, etc. And you really need to be positioned here to drive innovation, and you need the backing of this guy right here at the top in order to do this. I've seen other organizations try this sort of bottom up. Hey, I'm going to add innovation as a line item on everybody's management by objectives list. And that should be part of their job, is to be innovative. And without a process, without an accelerant to speed things up and to drive things, they tend to really not be very successful. Let's talk about market positioning. And I'm going to talk about it now specific to healthcare. These models that I'm going to present, you can really adapt to any industry. But this is one for healthcare. So what I say, and I have yet to have anybody really argue with me, especially from the tech sector, that 95% of hospitals are basically non-innovative. They're followers. And I say that about 5% of hospitals in the U.S. are true innovators, that they're eager to break new ground, they're proactive about establishing new ideas, about being an early adopter for new ideas. And most of the industry traditionally has been a follower, a late adopter. So what do I say here? That's Palomar's old logo in all its ugliness. That's before I joined, by the way. And I put them over there. You know, traditional community healthcare organization that ran facilities, 3 hospitals, SNFs, etc. And they're over there. So I got a call from the CEO. He had been there 3 years at Palomar and was brought in to really help transform the organization. He said, I need a lot of help. I need somebody to come in here and help transform this place. I want to move us in the innovation space. And would you come in and help me to do this? I said, okay, think of a cool title. So came up with this Chief Innovation Officer title. Now this is in May of 2007, and I don't know at that time if there were any others in the healthcare space. We created that role. I came in and said, look, we're going to embark on a shift left strategy. That is, we're going to move the organization over time as a recognized innovator. We're going to have a process to do that, and this is what we're going to do, and he, his full backing financially, etc. So that's been our mission here in our journey. This is one of the first slides I presented to our board, the 95-5% split. And I said, you guys are down here. They said, well, who the heck hired this guy? He's coming in and saying we're easily threatened, we're ordinary, we're dull, we're insulated, we don't act, we're risk averse. We're late adopters, and when we fail late and large. Yeah, that's kind of what Palomar was like. I had never heard of Palomar, and it wasn't, they were really not on the map in terms of the innovation space. These are the sort of traits up here that we want to think about culturally. And this is what we've really worked on. Heavy experimentation, early adoption, those sort of things. Important to know what innovation is not. And we get a lot of ideas that come really externally from startup companies that may have an idea, and then internally. Here's a great example, non-healthcare. Great example of non-innovation. Take the Chevy Cavalier, which was a crappy car in '82. Hopefully nobody owned that. You see it there in all its ugliness. And some genius in Detroit said, I'm going to really be innovative. I'm going to take a Chevy Cavalier, I'm going to add leather, a fancy grill, and I'm going to double the price. And these sort of boneheaded moves for General Motors over the years really killed the Cadillac brand and GM, and we know how the story ended. And it didn't end very well. And that's what happens if you really fully embark on trying to push through non-innovative, boneheaded ideas. Now, we work with really smart people in healthcare, highly educated people, but they may not see the opportunity in front of them. And even in the tech sector, this is the example we all use, the fall of DEC, right? Not looking at microcomputer revolution, not investing in things that were coming up in the future, and as a result, ultimately went out of business. Now, there are a lot of pundits in our industry. We pay a lot of money to consultants and advisory companies to come in and advise us on innovation. We might have an idea for a market adjacency or some transformational business idea, and we bring in a consultant, and sometimes these pundits don't have any real-world experience. And here's a great sort of example. This is the premier pundit, the guy who wrote The Innovator's Dilemma. Now, I can't tell you how many hospital CEOs I talked to or I met with that actually have this book on their desk. And they think by reading this book, they're going to become innovative. Okay? But here is the Mr. Innovation commenting about when Steve Jobs presented the iPhone. And he said, this is going to flop. The iPhone's not going to go anywhere. You don't want to. Why reinvent the phone? It's a commodity. Well, 250 million units later, and some serious revenue, if Steve Jobs would have, when he had the idea, if he would have called in Clayton as an advisor, he wouldn't have gone anywhere, right? So we really have to be cognizant of that. If you've got a strong desire to push through a transformational idea, and sometimes you go with your gut. I tell our people this, and this is you could put these on a 3x5 card in a hospital organization. You come in with a new idea, and you meet with various departments and the CFO, et cetera, and you get these sort of dynamics, right? You could write these down, you could pull these out in a meeting, and you're likely to hear those, okay? And then here's more. Get this all the time. The last one is the one you want to focus on, because if that's the one you get, then that's probably a darn good idea. That's the one you want to invest in. The problem in healthcare is we've done a great job over the years of setting up a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of committees, capital committees, governance boards, legal, regulatory process, finance committees. And so you may have a great idea, and you try to run it through a hospital organization, and at the end, you get something that has very little value after everyone's taken a bite out of the apple. And this is a big challenge for hospital organizations looking to innovate, is how you restructure the organization and streamline some of this. So let me talk about our process. So I came in with a clean sheet and designed this sort of process. Ideas come in internally and externally. Many of the ideas come in externally. In hospital organizations, most people are running around dealing with operations and running from meeting to meeting and don't have a lot of think time. And unless you have the luxury of carving out some think time, many of the ideas come in externally. We create organizational alignment. Where does the idea best fit? And then what is some estimate of the value of the idea? The third area is where we, depending on what it is, pilot, experiment, refine the particular idea. And then we look to operationalize. That's where you diffuse the idea and gain the actual market competitive advantage, the value. And in some cases, if you're doing your own R&D, and I'll give you some examples of where we've invented some stuff, then in our case, we've licensed that off. So we've established a for-profit company. It's a holding company where we license off IP to industry. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute here. This is a way to look at your innovation portfolio. Now it's ROI, but return on innovation. And you can slice and dice this many different ways, but you could take your ideas and look at the relative investment required to realize the idea against how competitive that idea is going to make you in the marketplace. So let's talk about positioning. Now this is not my chart, but I'm going to use it here today because it's a pretty straightforward chart. Any innovative idea could basically be carved down into three buckets. Is the idea associated with your core business? Is it adjacent? Is it a market adjacency? Or is it truly transformational? So if we look at Apple as an example, you would say, well, let's say Apple comes out with a new laptop, has a higher resolution screen, more memory, faster processor. That would be an innovation here at the core, right? That is basically their core business. When they came out with iTunes and disrupted the music business, now that's way up here in the transformational space. In healthcare, very difficult to establish ideas that are truly transformational because of the regulatory considerations and the payer dynamics, et cetera. I'm going to talk about some of these examples, and they kind of fall into these three categories here today. And I'll run through some of these very quickly in the interest of time, and I may skip over some of these. So how do you source innovative ideas in a healthcare organization? Really two basic models, outside in, inside out. Right? Outside in is the inorganic innovation model. I look to the outside. I'm out there meeting with startup companies, private equity. Let's see what's happening in the industry, if there's some secret sauce that we can bring in. Maybe we combine multiple startups together in a new solution and work with them and collaborate with them and partner with them with the idea that we would be one of the first out of the gate to adopt that particular idea. In many cases, there's a technology component associated with it. And then the other one is pure invention, if you will. That's where we do our own R&D. Obviously, this is where very few hospital organizations are involved in this side of the equation, doing hardcore R&D. Except for some academic centers that do research, bench research, as well as clinicians developing new procedures, maybe biomedical devices, there's very little of this among most hospital organizations. So the examples I'm going to run through today illustrate both sides of the coin to give you a sense of what these are all about. All right. Hospital-acquired infections, serious problem. You know about superbugs, MRSA, C. diff, all those top-of-mind superbugs for healthcare executives. The need to reduce the incidence of hospital-acquired infections, serious issue. We started to look outside in terms of what some startups were doing. We ran into a startup in Austin, Texas, basically running out of a garage, and took that technology out here to the West Coast and worked with them to refine it. We did our own testing, laboratory testing on it. And it's a device like this. This is actually the first generation of the device. So if you want to sterilize a hospital environment, you wheel it into the room, you turn it on. It has high-intensity xenon light, and in 5 to 10 minutes, it'll sanitize all the surfaces in that room. I think to date, we're still, and I think we've had this like 2.5 years now, we're still the only hospital organization in San Diego that has this still. Personal genomics. We talk a lot about genomics and the promise of genomics. The problem we have is that we've got the research community doing a lot of work in genomics, and the practicing physicians are not up to speed on genetic testing. And so we started to experiment and look at how we could introduce personal genomics to the population that we serve. And I was thinking about it, thinking, well, I don't want to throw a whole lot of money at it. Remember the idea of failing early and small as opposed to late and large? So I don't want to go out and spend like $5 million on genotyping equipment and all that. So how to do that? This is back in 2009. So Sergey Brin had just invested in 23andMe. And I contacted them and we sat down and said, look, we'd like to be the first hospital organization to offer a full panel of 23andMe genomic testing directly to the public. And we established this partnership to do that. And it really forced our clinicians to really understand, well, what are these tests all about? To understand the process of how you go about doing that. And then I thought, well, what is the best venue to do genotyping? Do you do it in a doctor's office? So we thought it'd be a little innovative here out of the box. And we were opening retail clinics in Albertson stores. And so I thought, wouldn't it be cool if you could go out and buy a carton of milk and get genotyped all in the same place? And so that's what we did. So we offered the saliva kits in our clinics and Albertson grocery stores. And then you would get by electronic means your results. You'd get alerted and you could pull those results up and then go and consult with your primary care doc. I'm going to run through a number of these that we're currently doing. Here's one, handheld hematoma detector. Very innovative, small little company. Handheld, battery operated. So this could be used out on a football field and also in an emergency situation, earthquake, sort of disaster situation. These sort of technologies we're experimenting with. We bring them in, we collaborate with the startup. In some cases, we help them through FDA process to do trials on a device, et cetera. So this is one we have in our emergency department right now that we're trialing. Breast cancer innovation. Here's a technology, very interesting sort of technology. What we're seeing in the U.S. Represented here on this chart, we saw a dramatic increase in DCIS that require lumpectomy procedures. And the need to be much more efficient in this space is something that hospitals are going to need to look at. There's a high re-excision rate in the U.S. So a surgeon will go in and remove a lump out of the breast, send it to the lab. Sometime later, the lab comes back for a percentage of these and says, you need to go back in. You didn't achieve clean margins, which is something we really need to reduce here. This technology I'm going to talk about here detects the bioelectric differences between normal tissue and cancerous tissue. And the technology, if it's used in the operating room during the procedure, can guide the surgeon to make sure that during that procedure they remove all of the appropriate tissue right then and there to reduce the re-excision rate. The device looks like this. It has a probe and basically a computer with algorithms, and it has a disposable tip on that probe that is thrown away after each procedure. The technology is very promising, shows a reduction in re-excision rates, and so it does in fact work. So why doesn't everyone use it? First of all, no one's ever heard of the thing. Again, most people that work in hospitals run around and are operational. They're not out there meeting with startup companies, haven't heard of this stuff. Secondly, even if you have, I'm going to show you why in this case the numbers don't make sense yet. So I ran some numbers and I said, okay, this device, the consumable piece costs about $1,000. And I said, worst case, the lowest sort of payment threshold is Medi-Cal. So for these procedures, you can see that you're not going to make money. It's a loser, right? The actual revenue that we realize in one of these is $504. The cost of the disposable is $1,000. So here's a very innovative company that has a solution to address a problem, but we can't make the numbers make sense. It might be in a global capitated scenario that we could make the numbers make sense. If you own a population, you're at risk for a population, you could probably make the numbers make sense in terms of reducing re-excision rates. You probably heard of this technology, Sotera Wireless. They've reinvented physiological monitoring. And we've been working with them for about 3.5 years since they had an initial design concept. And it's body-worn sensors that collect physiological parameters and then broadcast those wirelessly. You can collect those, you can insert those in the electronic record automatically. We were the first hospital organization in the world to deploy that. We deployed it for patients that were not traditionally monitored on a continuous basis. These were patients that were spot check monitored. And our philosophy is from the time you enter the front door, you should be monitored continuously, even if you're in a low acuity setting. So this fit in perfectly with our strategy. Those of you, I understand this is an IT group, we went out and got a grant from the California Healthcare Foundation to look at the viability of the direct protocol for HIE, because we really think the direct protocol is underutilized, and it's a low-cost way of doing direct physician-to-physician exchange of information. And there's some reports that were published after the study. And one of the things that we focused on for the techie types is HPD Plus, which is an emerging standard for provider directories, which is a critical component in an HIE that uses direct across HISPs. So we had 2 HISPs, and then we had this shared directory, and that's a key thing. And there's some papers that you can look up that describe the work we did and to prove this out. But I think this is a technology that's really underutilized by hospital organizations. So I put my friend Eric up there because he's out there promoting technology that we invented. So I thought, well, since he always gets brought up at these meetings anyway, I can't avoid it. So I put his picture up this time. So we did our own hardcore R&D and built technology that we licensed to Airstrip. that they're now going to market with. And I'll go through that process about how we do R&D. So back in September of 2010, we got the idea to build a mobile computing platform with mobile apps and a back-end architecture that could deliver information from EHR systems in a very agnostic way, as well as real-time physiological data out to mobile devices. And we kicked that off, and I ran it like a startup. So I ran it basically outside of Palomar, like you would a startup company, with contract resources. I got money from the Palomar Foundation. They were the VC for this effort. And by, December of 2011, we had a pretty good working prototype of the technology and got a lot of interest by industry and by private equity looking to take the technology to market. So I made the rounds to the venture community and went out and pitched it to VCs, pitched it to Sequoia Capital. And Sequoia, as you may know, is one of the top venture capital firms really in the world. I mean, they did the initial investment in Apple and Google and Cisco, and they latched onto it. They had just invested in a company called Airstrip Technologies, and they saw it as a very complementary piece to Airstrip's technology portfolio. We licensed it to them, and now that has been incorporated into the Airstrip One product. And they've signed up customers like Dignity Health and some others recently that are using the platform to mobilize information from EHRs and physiological monitoring systems. You may have heard about this. We recently launched Glassomics. So Glassomics is an incubator, and Qualcomm is the lead sponsor. They're basically funding our work. And this is an incubator to do R&D in wearable computing devices. Google Glass, smartwatches, sensor-based technology, and we've been doing engineering work in this space really only for about 3 months. That's when we launched this. Our initial focus is on Google Glass, and if you want more information, you can go to glassomics.com, and we're going to post our work up there as we build stuff. Here's some prototypes. So we're building prototypes initially for physician users using Google Glass and looking at use cases for glass in a healthcare environment. And we've built some apps for barcode scanning medications as well as person identification. We're able to go against a live EHR system and pull information in real time and present it on glass. Laboratory results, we pulled out these old fish bones that, if there's any docs in the room, you probably haven't seen these since med school, but very useful on glass because of the UI paradigm on glass. Real-time vitals, so I mentioned Sotera, so we've mobilized Sotera, so a physician walking around wearing Google Glass can see the waveforms and the information. Diagnostic medical image matching, we're doing some work there in the dermatology space using some Qualcomm technology called Vuforia. So you could use glass and take a snapshot of a mole and then go against the database and do a differential diagnosis match and present to the dermatologist or the primary care doc some recommendations about what that mole might be. Differential diagnosis. So here we're working with 2 companies that are contributing some IP. Nuance on the voice recognition side, and then a company called Isabel Healthcare out of the UK that has indexed the medical literature. So it's a Watson-like capability, and we're combining those 2 technologies with our own Google Glass environment that we stood up to allow clinicians to talk in symptoms and then go against the literature and pull back recommendations. We can also go against the EHR system and pull back diagnosis and then come back with a differential recommendation. Genomics, same story on glass. And I'm going to leave you with this, and then we'll open it up for questions. So you may have seen this on Bloomberg. They came out with a program called Bloomberg Brink, and Brink highlights leaders in various industries that are doing innovative work. And they came out and spent a couple days with us and did an episode on what Palomar was doing. So I'm going to play that for you now. Should I make it start up?
So, Rachel, I went to see Palomar Medical Center, which bills itself as the hospital of the future. Except when I got there, it was weird because it didn't even feel like a hospital. And that's partly because they've rethought the entire building. They've built it from the ground up. And it incorporates all of the latest thinking and technologies that are trying to address a lot of the growing inefficiencies in healthcare.
Well, that's great for Palomar that they've been able to start from the ground up. But what about the established hospitals out there that aren't starting from scratch? What can they take and what can they learn from Palomar?
Well, Palomar thinks of itself also as sort of a laboratory for healthcare technology. So many of the innovations that they are pioneering right now might well be rolled out to older established hospitals in the future.
We're headed to this new hospital. It's brand new, and they basically started with a whole clean sheet on how to design a hospital and the kind of equipment that they have within it. And the hope is to create something more efficient, better for patients, and able to handle a lot of the stresses the healthcare system is going to encounter in the future.
How do you build today that allows you to grow into that future? Whatever we were going to build needed to be very patient-centric, needed to be very flexible. So the challenge for us is how do we take 2 steps for every 10 that we take today? And can technology help us get there?
I would imagine that in a lot of hospitals, lots of institutions in general, there's a resistance at times to innovation.
This is a living lab in its own way. If you have an idea and you want to test it out, we're willing to take a look at that, and we're willing to help make you better in that process.
Hi, I'm Sam.
Hi, Sam. Welcome to San Diego.
I have spent some time in hospitals, fortunately not a lot, but I can tell you they don't usually look like this.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's our objective.
You've definitely succeeded. It seems a little bit more maybe like a hotel.
Definitely not medical, and you're going to get that feel as you explore this building. This is a result of a healthcare bond that was passed in California, the largest healthcare bond in California history.
Price tag. How much did this whole operation cost?
This hospital is about $1 billion.
The $1 billion hospital.
That's right.
Excellent.
So the first thing you do when you come into a hospital is get registered.
Right, which usually means a clipboard. And about 38 pages
That's
of
right.
paper.
Well, we don't do that here.
Please come a little closer to the camera. Please come a little closer to the camera. Please come. We've finished taking pictures of your eyes.
That was it?
That was it.
Can I move my head now?
Yes, you can.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're done. You're now registered. Importantly, as you go through the hospital, when tests are ordered for you, we can accurately identify all that information now and associate it with you to make sure that all of the records are stored in one place.
You guys have been not only rethinking registration, but all aspects of sort of the hospital experience with things like monitoring vital signs. Vital signs, when I think of the times that I've been in the hospital, have been exceedingly annoying.
Right. We've got Jim Moon from Sotera Wireless with us today.
Hi, Jim.
This is the old way of doing spot check monitoring. And we're the first hospital in the world to implement this next generation physiological monitoring platform.
The device itself is a small wrist-worn device that goes on the patient's arm.
Can I grab a hold of it?
Certainly can.
It's light.
Very lightweight. All of the vital sign data flows wirelessly from the patient to our system and from there into the electronic medical record. That frees the nurses up to do what nurses should be doing, which is caring for patients rather than keeping records.
Okay, so I'm here with Melissa. Hi, Melissa.
Hi.
It's such a pleasure to meet you. And what can you tell me are you doing here?
I'm hooking up the electrodes to you so we can start getting your heart rate, your skin temperature. This is your Rolex.
Is it this way? Okay, I never know it.
You are at 106 heart rate right now. If I wanted to, I could touch that heart rate there and actually see your rhythm.
I've got rhythm.
Your oxygen is 96 right now.
So all of this is being displayed on this device. It's also going somewhere else, right?
We invented our own applications.
99 cents?
Well, hopefully a little more than that. Physicians can now have this device at home.
Okay.
So if they get a call here from the floor, they can see all of the waveform information coming from the monitor.
So that means they can be providing sort of care and assistance on the go Whether they're in the building or not, that's more efficient, that's going to lower costs for you.
Right? It's all about anytime, anywhere access.
Great.
And Airstrip is a Sequoia-funded
yeah.
startup that's
Right.
taking this technology to market now.
Oh, yeah, Sequoia. Well,
They'll be selling that to other hospitals.
Very, very cool. So, Orlando, where are you?
I'm using this Vigo robot. We have several of these around the hospital.
So the big benefit here is obviously that not only can you have sort of, virtual presence, but you're able to move around. Can we take a little walk?
Yeah, let's do that.
I'm assuming doctors, nurses, other medical practitioners are able to go visit patients. Is that how this works?
Yeah, we encourage family members that are not in San Diego, family members really from around the world, take control of these robots and visit with patients. We found that they just love it.
You are currently sitting at what, a laptop?
Yeah, so I'm just sitting at a laptop and
Right.
using the piece of software that we make available, and that's it. It's very, very easy to use. It's a great tool.
And it's a lot cheaper than airfare.
Exactly.
I see that we're in what appears to be a pretty standard issue hospital room. I couldn't help but notice whatever this is. Do not touch or lean on. Well, I've already now done that. I'm sorry.
This is a robotic room disinfection machine.
That's the scariest thing I've heard in weeks.
This machine uses very high-intensity xenon light. If we were to turn this machine on while we're in here, you'd get a really bad sunburn.
Okay.
But what this light does is it attacks the DNA of the pathogens and prevents the pathogens from replicating. In 5 to 10 minutes, this device is going to sterilize all of the surfaces in this room.
Howard Hughes would have loved one of these. So is this machine new to hospitals?
There are very few. We were the first on the West Coast. This is a added safety measure to go way beyond what other hospitals are doing.
Have you noticed, since using the Xenex, any change in terms of people getting infected?
Our own internal research shows a dramatic decrease. This thing really is a superbug killer and really does work as advertised.
We don't know what the next 10 years will produce, but based on the infrastructure, what we've created here allows us to respond to any of those needs 10 and 15 years from now. So wherever you go in this building, you have a sense of what the future could be, not just what today is.
Okay, questions, Q&A, any questions?
Okay, as before, we have 2 microphones. One will be on each side of the room. Okay, we have a question here in the middle. Oops, sorry.
Hi, so one of the slides mentioned for the ROI, you're looking at changing competitiveness versus dollars spent. So before a project, how do you estimate that change in competitiveness? And after it, how do you measure the change?
Yep, good question. So upfront, depending on what it is, now, some of the efforts are pure R&D with no sort of ROI established upfront, right? So if you're doing invention, hey, we got an idea to mobilize EHRs and physiological equipment. No one has that platform. We're going to build it ourselves. Hard to come up with a serious ROI. We didn't know, in terms of embarking on that one, whether we were ultimately going to be able to license it off either, right? So those, in that category, there isn't. In some of these others, you can work up this disinfection machine. You can work up the costs associated with hospital-acquired infections, what you have to deal with as a hospital organization relative to that problem, and you could take a good swag at what an ROI would be if you brought that disinfection equipment in and were able to reduce superbugs. And then going back around at the end, yeah, we always do a end of project sort of evaluation. In some of these, it's a little, you don't want to be too draconian and less traditional, if you will, in terms of the analysis, because you want to encourage experimentation, and you don't want to put a wet blanket on what could be some viable ideas just by running them through a stage gate CFO sort of process.
Hi, Orlando. It was a fantastic presentation, and I was really excited to see the kind of the research that you're doing. My question is, what do you see about the adoption? Like, how much adoption you think, or for these technologies. There are a lot of startups, building these many applications, and I come from Bay Area, so almost like every day I meet roughly like 10 or 20 startups, doing health IT solutions.
So here's what we're seeing on that question is, there's a ton of VC money flooding into healthcare IT startups, less on the biomedical device side. In the last 6 months, that's dried up. So I talk to VCs that say, I'm never going to invest in biomedical devices. You've got the Obama tax on devices. You've got hospitals cutting back in terms of buying new equipment. So that there's a wet blanket on that on the regulated side, on the device side. But in health IT, I'm seeing a huge flood of money into what are maybe 90% startups that are kind of crap, really. Somebody gets an idea, VC throw, or they'll get an angel round, $500K, $1 million, and then they have trouble going to an A round, because ultimately it reveals that the idea was kind of useless. But there's just a ton of money being thrown into patient experience. There's like 1 million of those. Analytics, you name it like that, those sort of things. The problem that the startups have is they don't have a good pool of healthcare organizations that they can partner with. So we get a flood of these contacting us, and then the academic centers, of course, probably do. But then there's a handful of those, and so you've got just a ton of these startups trying to work with you, and you have to filter them out. But their goal really is to get something installed in a real environment so they can go to the next round of financing. That's a big challenge. As I said, 95% of hospitals aren't proactively looking to do anything new and don't know how to engage with a startup. So it's a challenge for startups right now.
We are going through those challenges today as we speak. So my question also is related to how many years or how long you think this would take for all the other hospitals to look at technologies like this? It's a big question that you cannot define probably.
Forever.
Yeah.
You go into most traditional hospital organizations, they've never heard about any of this stuff. They're not actually interested in it, looking at it. And their organizations are in most part driven by their CFO. And of course, he's not interested in it. Some of this costs money, and so forget, we don't want to deal with that. And they don't have a culture of innovation and are not eager to think about new stuff. So if you're doing a startup and you want to penetrate 4,000 hospitals, a large portion of those you're going to be challenged unless you can show a serious ROI on the financial side, where it's obvious that it pays for itself. You give it away maybe on an at-risk basis. That sort of model might be viable.
Thank you very much. It was a great presentation. As an R&D guy, I find it really hard to get executive management to invest in a culture of innovation. How did you get Palomar to invest in your ideas and to be able to get to that culture of innovation?
It starts with the CEO. And if you don't have a CEO who's looking to be transformational, it's a non-starter. And he's the one who recruited me, so he basically had an agenda to be innovative. If you don't have that, then doing some of this stuff is going to be just too hard. Too hard. Now, I will say that sometimes I get ideas, and our people in a particular area of the organization are reluctant. I've done it, this way for 30 years, and I've worked in various hospitals, and, we're fine the way we are, status quo. And in some cases, I'll ram it through. So in some cases, I have to be the benevolent dictator, unfortunately, and get them to at least try it, and then test the, just experiment a little bit.
Orlando back here.
Hi, I thought your promotion of 23andMe through the pharmacies was a great idea, but I'm wondering how ready did you find the population for that type of technology?
So you could segment the population out. So we have an area in our service area where there's a lot of high-tech companies, and employees in those companies are interested in that sort of thing. And then we have another segment of the population, of the underserved population, that really didn't latch on to that. Now, I should say that was a service where you had to pay out of pocket. So, the high-tech community kind of latched onto it, was eager to see what their DNA results look like. Others not.
Any other questions?
This is John Risk, and I'll just ask the question just to keep it going. You mentioned how you have a patient portal or some kind of patient interface and an app. Did you say you have an app for patients or not? Was that a patient app or an app for doctors to use?
That's an app for physicians to use on the go.
And are you looking at an app for patients so that once they get in the hospital, they can kind of chart their progress?
Yeah, that's actually the easy one, because if you solve the physician one, if you can mobilize all of the information that you need for a physician to make decisions, then to mobilize information for the patient is the easy one. So that we could very easily do that now using the IP that we built, right? Because it'll be sort of a dumbed down subset of the physician sort of information that you would deliver to the patient.
And then on the subject of apps, what % of your clinicians are on Apple versus Samsung or the Google-based Droid-type devices?
So in September of 2010, when we kicked off the development effort, I think we were at Android, on the Android side, Android 1.2, very little market penetration. It turns out, I said, that's the one we're going to start with. People said, man, are you completely crazy for starting with Android? It's just more open, and we could innovate on the Android platform at that time. And a lot of the physicians early on got on the Apple bandwagon, right? But the numbers are starting to turn around a little bit. So Android is gaining. Now we run on both, but we're seeing Android obviously take off now and really eat away at Apple's share, even among physicians. So it's going to be an interesting sort of balance. You have to do both.
And then the last question, on the wireless side, is your hospital partnered with a single carrier, or are you, like for example, do you have antenna on your hospital for a specific carrier? Are you sharing or have a co-location agreement with multiple carriers? For
Carriers
use?
On the CDMA
wireless
side?
Yes.
On the CDMA side, yes, so it's multiple carriers coming in there. Okay. The usual suspects. Verizon, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
AT&T?
And just curious,
yep.
to the extent you're experiencing any clogging of your networks, given all these new devices that are in your building?
No, on the Wi-Fi side and the hardwired side, we early on established a collaboration with Cisco and really built the Rolls-Royce of hospital networks. It is a super robust network that, and you hit the point, to support all this stuff, you've got to have a really modern network in the hospital. And that was the foundation that we built with Cisco, partnering up with them. And that was a true partnership, not a vendor sort of relationship.
Okay, I have one question over here.
All right.
Steve, how much time do we have? Is this the last one?
Should be the last question.
Okay.
I was just interested in the adoption relative to the Google Glass, since it's such a different form factor, and whether or not the physicians or any of them are kind of taking to it or getting new ideas about how you might use it perhaps differently than just viewing.
Well, I've been really surprised by the interest by physicians. Surgeons, really interested in using it in the operating room, as well as docs in the hospital. So there's been a lot of interest. Now, we're really early in the game, of course, since it's really not a product that's available to be sold. So we have about 10,000 Google Glasses distributed worldwide, and distributed to the Glass Explorers, they call them. And so we've got a group of those explorers and our engineers working with them, and we're just very early on. It remains to be seen when it finally becomes a product that you can go to Best Buy and buy. You know, how many docs are going to go out and buy it? I don't know at this point. The other one we're looking at is smartwatches. So Qualcomm recently announced a smartwatch, and we're doing work with them. And that's another sort of form factor to think about delivering information on.
Orlando, thank you very much. Let's give him a great round of applause. Good job. Okay. Stay in your seats, everybody. Stay in your seats. We're not going to break for lunch for another 20 minutes. So we've asked one of our event sponsors, who is actually hosting this lunch, to speak for a few minutes. And that organization is Cerner. And I'd